we're gonna have a third come in blazing glory.
Give me 1 minute. Give me.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome. So my name is Sarah Houston. I serve as the Executive Director of Protect Our Aquifer. We're based in Memphis, Tennessee. Our mission is about protecting our drinking water supply. A little bit more into that in a second. I came to Memphis in 2018. Just kind of a water nerd, going to work at university. Had a lot of ideas about public engagement and education around our drinking water supply, which is very unique in West Tennessee. But moving to Memphis, I really realized a lot of decisions in that town are made by fear or out of public shame or not for the right reasons, and realized what an extreme need there is for advocacy. And there's a really amazing activist community already there, and it's kind of playing whack-a-mole. There's a lot of issues, and so our organization just kind of came into the water space, specifically our drinking water supply, and really tried to be very science-led, but also work with environmental justice communities, frontline communities, and ensure that they've got the data to help build their points and make sure that their voices are being heard in these regulatory spaces. So it's been a journey, and xAI has been a big issue for the past year and a half. Nobody really saw it coming, and it's taken over our lives.
Hello, my apologies for my tardiness. I had a snafu with tights because I hadn't put on tights. Welcome to fall. But nevertheless, Latricia Adams, I'm the founder, CEO, and president of an organization called Young, Gifted, and Green. We are a civil rights, and I know it's a dirty word now, but environmental justice.
Not here.
Not here, yay. Environmental justice organization. Will be 10 years old in February of 2026. Can't believe it. Our work actually got started in the wake of the Flint water crisis, and then we expanded both our mission and vision to be inclusive of not just lead issues, but more encompassing of any type of environmental injustice, prioritizing frontline communities. And so we work still in Flint, Michigan, Baltimore, Maryland, Washington, D.C., and my beloved hometown of Memphis, Tennessee. So where xAI is located is in zip code 38109. That is where my parents are from. That's where they met as teenagers and fell in love, got married, all of those fond memories, but also surrounded by a significant amount of pollution. We'll go into that a little bit later around how even beyond just xAI. This is a historically redline community, so pretty much there's 17 or more now industry polluting companies or corporations literally just in this one particular zip code. So this is very near and dear to me and very personal. My matriarch's home is still in 38109, so this definitely hits close to home. But we're happy to talk about this fight that we are still enduring in Memphis, and very happy to be here. And my favorite guy has arrived.
I think I caught my breath. I just came from a meeting last night in Natchez Trace State Park on the other side of the state, so hey, I haven't seen you in a while. So
we're doing intros.
We're doing intros.
You're great.
I'm Scott Bamber. I'm the conservation director of the Tennessee chapter of the Sierra Club. I live down in Memphis with my favorite people, Tricia and Sarah, and this has been a really very challenging fight in Memphis because there's a lot of community support for what they think is progress, but it's being done all wrong. It's been done without permits. I'm going to say it illegally, and I guess we're going to get into that.
Yeah. Cool. So just to give y'all lay of the land. So like what Tracy mentioned, this is in Southwest Memphis, 38109. So right here is the Tennessee-Mississippi state border, and then you've got the Mississippi over there on the far left. So it's the very bottom nook of Memphis. And has anybody heard of the Mahalia pipeline that was canceled years ago? So that was going to come, with Valero's right up there, down through Bogstown, through Davis Wellfield. This is the drinking water supply for the area, and then continue through North Mississippi. So this community has, bear the brunt of pollution and threats for a long time. Latricia was mentioning the industrial parks over here. There's TVA's gas plant, a big gigawatt facility is where that food box is. We've got this big industrial park, President's Island. And so xAI Facility 1 is right up there across the street from TVA. And that went into a former building called Electrolux. It was this big manufacturing facility. We gave them all these pilot tax breaks. They bailed, they took all the money with them, and it was not a very good public project. That building's been sitting empty. So that's the building that xAI purchased for their facility number 1. We'll talk a little more about facility number 2 in detail later, but just to give you a lay of the land, it's down here in a neighborhood called Whitehaven, also predominantly black neighborhood, and it's this warehouse that was just kind of built to attract some kind of a Amazon type corporation. And instead, xAI also bought this, and they're building out even more data center computer chips. And you notice right here on the border, so there is a smaller TVA plant right here, and they are trying to build a power plant to directly serve them.
And this power plant site, so it had infrastructure already, because back in like the mid-2000s, it was built as a peaking merchant gas plant there, combined cycle plant, similar to the one that TVA runs right across the street. TVA acquired the one that they continue to operate. The other one was determined to be like uneconomical, and so they pretty much demolished the site, but all of this gas infrastructure was already there.
So we want to do, what are we talking about? How do we want to do this?
See all these cool looking things right here? Those are all gas turbines. And there's a whole bunch of them on the other side of the building too. And when xAI first started up, they went to the Memphis Light, Gas and Water, our local utility, and they asked for 150 megawatts of power. And it took a little while to get that secured, because the Tennessee Valley Authority Board of Directors has to okay a power agreement that large. And so in the meantime, Elon was in just such a rush to get this thing going that these turbines start showing up. And they're basically big semi-trailers with a gas turbine, a jet engine on the back of them. They had no pollution controls at all on them when they first started getting installed. We could see them from the road. Reporters are calling and being like, what are those noisy things with like wavy, heat mirages rising off of them? And so we went down and took a couple of drone shots of it and figured out like
There's a bunch.
There's a bunch of them. Ends up being 35 of them. We pointed this out to them after doing overflights, and they said, oh, but we're only running 15 at a time. So another flight was taken with a forward-looking infrared camera, and everywhere where you see like a red spot or a yellow spot, that is a turbine operating. There was 32 operating at the time this picture was taken, and so they just basically lied. At this point in time, there is no permits at all.
And no one from our city or county leadership is like calling them out on this either. It's literally just the activist community.
And an important thing here to know is that Shelby County's health department has delegated authority over the Clean Air Act. That gets delegated to the state of Tennessee, and then if individual health departments, it's the same thing in Davidson County, Nashville, they have delegated authority, but they are much less transparent than TDEC, who puts all their stuff up on a data viewer that we can all see, all the correspondence that's going back and forth. We can't see that stuff at all with what's going through the health department.
All right, so to give you a bit of a timeline, if you will, so xAI was announced in June 2024. Everyone was blindsided, so not even necessarily just like constituents or residents, but also our elected bodies. So there was a press conference that was held And interestingly enough, Sarah and I and one of our other coalition colleagues, Keyshawn Pearson, we're actually in a meeting with the mayor discussing like how we can improve pollution, how we can think about how we can do that viably from an economic perspective. And then lo and behold, this announcement was made. Now, when we say that our elected bodies were blindsided, essentially there was a courtship, if you will, unbeknownst to us, with the mayor, the president of the Memphis Chamber of Commerce, as well as the president of our utility provider, Memphis Light, Gas, and Water. And so essentially there is a bit of ambiguity or like a gap, if you will, with our land use code. So the reason why essentially xAI was able to go into this former building, which was formerly Electrolux, they weren't doing significant changes to the actual building, so they were able to bypass a traditional like land use process. So that means that our land use board didn't have an opportunity to make recommendations to our city council. City council was not able to vote it up or down. So essentially we were robbed of our democracy. With a development this big, like absolutely it should have gone through a traditional process. In addition to that, as it relates to the methane gas turbines, they're not fixed. So you've heard from Scott that the turbines are kind of like on a trailer. And so essentially we did several things. So at the very beginning, we asked, where is the permit? And so then that's when we learned that they did not have a permit. And essentially the health department was claiming that since there were temporary turbines, that they could actually operate 364 days without like going through a permitting process. So that means that they were operating, these turbines are on all day, every day. They are noisy, there's a stench, and remember there's cumulative impacts because it's surrounded by all of these other industries. So essentially, once our elected bodies, some of them found out that their power had essentially been like robbed from them. There's there's one particular councilwoman that has been very vocal about the issue, and then also with our county commission. So in addition to there being like a complete lack of transparency, it got really contentious on the ground. So it's literally not up for debate that these turbines, they emit NOx and formaldehyde. Now keep in mind, in 38109, there's a significant presence of public health issues, cancer, for example. My father died from a heart attack at 65 years old. He grew up in 38109, was typically like healthy. He died at 65. 6 months later, his mother, the matriarch, died from lung cancer. I think about on my maternal side, my mom, all of her aunts, every single one of her aunts died from cancer. They also grew up in 38109. So essentially there was public outrage, one because of the lack of transparency, but then also how are you allowing this billionaire, right? The South African expat to come and set up shop with no type of regulatory oversight, no accountability. So then we went to EPA, like surely there has to be something like that you can do to intervene. Keep in mind, this is the previous administration. This is the Biden-Harris administration. And so essentially what EPA told us is because this is so novel, this is so unprecedented, they literally did not provide significant or substantial guidance. And so our local health department stood on what their initial theory was, is that they can operate because it's temporary for 364 days, which is so strange, where the responsibility of a health department is to protect the public health and well-being of residents, of constituents. So we weren't trying to hear that. So from day one in June, Protect Our Aquifer, Young Gifted and Green, and Memphis Community Against Pollution, we did a joint statement immediately the day that they did the press conference, saying like, we don't like this, we have significant concerns, and then we started to peel back a lot of layers of absolute chaos and insidious behavior with xAI. Also something that I want to note from a people power perspective. So as Scott mentioned, TDAG, and I can't believe I'm saying this, is giving more props to a state agency, but TDAG does provide not only more transparency with providing data around permits, but they also have a hearing. They have a public hearing. In Shelby County, we don't have public hearings on air permits. The only thing that they do essentially is offers to the general public opportunities to submit written comment. And of course, it's in this inconspicuous website that no one can find. Shout out to the Southern Environmental Law Center, who does a lot of fact finding and keeping us abreast, even though we're residents of Memphis. And so what we were able to do from an activism community, we petitioned to our county commission, making it mandatory for there to be a public hearing on this permit. We have I don't know, between 500 to...
There was like almost 1,000.
Yeah, maybe like,
commenters.
yeah. So literally in dissent of this project, at the hearing, it had to be at least over 500 people that showed up for the hearing. They ran out of time. That was interesting. You can actually Google it and you can see some clips that have gone viral at this point. There was, for the first time, a representative from xAI that had come to this hearing. Keep in mind, they refused to engage with community.
And this is like February of 25,
Yes.
and this facility was announced in June of 24. No public meetings ever, no any public facing anything from xAI at all at this point.
And another thing to note here
8 months later.
is, as this story broke, people started looking into it, and Forbes magazine did a story early on. They did,
Bloomberg,
and Bloomberg did. They did open records requests. All of the city officials and different departments had been made to sign non-disclosure agreements before the public even knew that the project was coming. So we were just not getting information.
And then
City
because
council
it's
members weren't even
right,
getting
right. So and because it's private, right? Even if you do get a public records request from city officials, it's redacted because it's not public. So that is problematic. In addition to that, the Chamber of Commerce was on this big miscommunication campaign, pretty much touting that we have engaged with all the regulatory agencies. It doesn't matter who you engage with, you don't have a permit. So what are you talking about? In order for regulatory processes to be enacted, you have to have a permit. And so in this mailer that they sent to people's homes, okay, they targeted people in 38109 where Colossus 1 is located, and maybe 38116 as well, which is the adjacent community for Colossus 2. You had Memphis Gas and Water to say, we don't have anything to do with that. We're not they put their logo on it.
All the regulatory bodies' logo.
So EPA, TDAG, Shelby County Health Department, Memphis Gas and Water, TBA. Wow. That was really
A
bold.
lot of those agencies did say afterwards, we didn't give anybody permission to do that.
Right.
But you can see what we're dealing with
Chambers
here.
just on one.
Right. They also were hosting private meetings with kind of grass top, high profile leaders within the community, especially in the faith-based community, which is kind of gross. But at the end of the day, there was a lot of mobilization on the ground and a lot of resistance. Another thing that I'll name, which is still kind of icky, but we know that unfortunately that this data center is not going anywhere. One of the things that I know Young, Gifted, and Green and this Community Against Pollution advocated for were community benefits. So what you're not going to do is just poison people and then they just die. Right, this is it. So our mayor actually submitted to our city council a proposal which was recently passed, where essentially with xAI they don't get tax breaks, which they tout themselves about that, but I'm we don't care, you're poisoning a whole black community. But essentially they pay property taxes, and so a percentage of those property taxes will go directly into those communities that are being directly impacted.
Which it should be going into those communities anyhow.
Right. The fact that the deal was bad on the front end, that it took pressure from activists, public shaming, in order for you to even consider community. There was actually the first community, I guess, town hall was actually hosted, I believe, in like August, sorry, I know it started with an A. August of 2024 by Memphis Lake Gas and Water, but they were limited to what they could talk about. They were only talking about like things surrounding the grid, things surrounding water, but essentially we were like, where is everybody else? Like, where's the health department? Like, they kind of left MOGW just like out there on the limb. No one from xAI was present. They got scolded also at this community meeting. But the issue is, it was such a bad deal on the front end. There was no consideration about community. In fact, verbatim, I won't say their name, but there was a county official that literally boldly stated that this particular community was the least path of resistance. But I am here to say, as a product of Memphis, I grew up in 38116, where Colossus 2 is located. We are not the least path of resistance, and I hope that they've learned this the hard way, unfortunately.
They have. Do you want to talk about the, we've got just a couple slides about the attainment. So I don't know, Scott, you want to do just a little bit about the lawsuit?
Yeah.
So I mean, attainment was super important because, again, these things are running for for a whole year basically without a permit. Because there is no permit, there is no requirement for there to be any pollution control devices on these things. It was straight pipe stacks coming out of the back of these turbines, just no controls at all. Memphis has had a history of being out of attainment for low-level ozone, for smog. We got into attainment after basically shutting down a coal plant that was operating right in the same place. We also got rid of coal boilers at Archer Daniels Midland and Cargill, big food processing plants that were operating their own boilers that were, all like on President's Island. And so we got back into attainment. But that only lasted like 3 years before we started slipping back out again. For 4 years, annually, we're out of attainment. We have a problem with smog. This has been a problem in Memphis. We're on and off the #1 asthma capital in the United States. And so one of the things we did is we petitioned EPA to take us back into non-attainment again, because in non-attainment, we would be able to apply more stringent rules to permits coming forward.
And just one thing to note, like when it comes to monitoring and data collection, there is no air quality monitor in South Memphis, where all the industries are.
The pollution is all here.
Yeah.
Those are the monitors.
Yeah, so they always say Shelby Farms, which is 13 miles away. It's like, well, it's downwind, they'll catch it.
Suburbs.
Yeah, and it's like a big, huge farm surrounded by forests and trees. Like, it's not the same. So, even being out of attainment with these two monitors far away from the polluting industries is like, well, then how bad is it down here?
And one of the important things to capture here is that our metropolitan statistical area for air pollution matters is North Mississippi, Shelby County, and into West Memphis, into eastern Arkansas.
I also want to just quickly name that in 38116, where Colossus 2 is located, that's where the airport is and the FedEx hub.
Mhm.
So that's important to note as well.
The biggest user of our airport is FedEx by far. Like, the airport is more for FedEx than for us.
Yeah.
And that's a whole other issue.
Yeah. So,
And lawyers will like this.
yeah. So in July, literally right, of course it was convenient, it was right by the 4th of July holiday. The health department, after thousands of community members said no, of course they approved this permit. And so there was actually very limited information around the appeal process. But shout out again to the Southern Environmental Law Center. We filed an appeal. against the air permit in partnership with the NAACP. And then also with the Southern Environmental Law Center and the NAACP filed an intent to sue. So this has been consuming a lot of my life. In fact, we're hoping that we get a hearing before the end of 2025. So hoping that it'll be later on this year. But essentially, of course, there has been a lot of horrific PR against xAI, and so there was concern on their end. One, they did not expect for us to file that permit. I did get a little bit of joy out of that. Didn't expect for us to, appeal the permit, and then the double whammy with the intent to sue, especially with having a historical civil rights organization to step in. So it's not even just like the local NAACP chapter, it's also headquarters that also comes with their own general counsel as well, that is supporting on this issue. Now I am a little bit limited to what I can say because it's still very much so open litigation, but essentially what I am the most proud of for right now, you being xAI, know that you're violating the Clean Air Act. You literally are operating these turbines without any permits. But on the other side of that is also holding our health department accountable. There has been countless times, even beyond just xAI, where they just passed out permits like Skittles. Even if you go into the documents, because of course you like looking at documents, attorneys. If you go to look at the actual permit that was issued, you find very little implications about public health. One of the supposed value adds for a health department to be able to issue out air permits is that you would take in consideration public health risk as well as environmental risk, and you just don't see that. So we are still actively in the appeal process. Of course, we anticipate that they are going to stand their ground and say that they felt like they were authorized to issue this permit. If it doesn't go the way that we need it to go with the appeal, we're going to keep using our legal process to hold this entity accountable. So not just xAI, but also our health department. Now, one thing that I will say that I'm actually not in opposition to in theory, xAI is just like, we were allowed to do it. We were doing like what the health department allowed us to do. And that is definitely partially true. So say less, we're gonna hold both of y'all accountable, right? So both of you all are problematic, and so we're gonna exercise all of our legal rights to the best of our ability to continue to fight and to hold both entities accountable.
So, can I clarify for the lawyers in here? The first one action is the notice of intent to sue that they allowed this to happen, the 35 turbines to operate without a permit. The second is the appeal of the permit that did finally get issued for 15 turbines. Mm-hmm. But even then, that does require some pollution controls, but not, we believe, adequate pollution controls. And ironically, the only state environmental department that commented that there should be more stringent controls was Arkansas, because they recognize their co-responsibility for that metropolitan statistical area, not knocking TDEC.
So this is another image of the other side of the first facility. So these were the biggie turbines they brought in. Look at these suckers.
It's just a straight stack.
I mean, and like you could literally, like the roadway is like right here, and you can literally drive and look at them and just see the that heat mirage, it's just like these things are cranking. And so one thing just to know on this picture, so this is one of the substations that they built. And so this was kind of at the very beginning of the saga was, they first needed 150 megawatts of power. And, TVA and MLGW didn't have that immediately just to give them. They had to build this first substation. Then a few months later, Elon tweets, we're going to 300 chips, aka we need 300 megawatts of power. And we're seeing this tweet being like, is this real? Like, are they gonna now double the amount of power demand? Sure enough, yep, everybody hops to and starts doing that. And so literally our community is dealing with a billionaire tweeting how this is gonna happen, and then like, you know, city council, chamber of commerce, TDAG, health department, everyone's like, TVA, MLGW, like, I guess we gotta figure out how to service them an additional 150 megawatts.
And that still hasn't been approved, and not to be conspiracy minded.
Do
You know,
it.
this is all going on as Elon Musk is running Doge and running amok in the federal government. So they are right now only receiving 150 megawatts from TVA via Memphis Light, Gas, and Water. They've requested another 150, but because Donald Trump sacked half of the TVA board and we haven't had a quorum, TVA hasn't been able to approve the additional, and so we're stuck with these turbines.
Exactly. So the turbine situation was literally their like gap, making up that gap. And if we weren't dealing with the world's richest man, if we were dealing with a quote unquote normal company, the pace of this would be very different. It would be much slower, but we're not dealing with that. So that's been a big challenge of this whole thing, is just he's thrown up billions of dollars at this, and it's going at his own pace that like our community and our leadership is like not keeping up with.
And then I also just want to note that it's also a bit of a breakdown in transparency, even with the stakeholders that made this decision.
Yeah.
So specifically, it's not funny, but you have to laugh to keep from crying. Specifically with that tweet, we actually went to a MLGW board meeting, and Sarah literally had to say on the record, have you seen this tweet? And to see the president of Memphis Light, Gas, and Water just kind of being like, this is new to us,
Yeah.
right? Like you could just see like the what, you know, in his face. That's crazy that we're relying on a tweet to inform something that is this intense.
Yeah.
So I did want to name that it's not just the breakdown in communication and transparency with community, but in some instances with like the players that were involved in the decision. In fact, there have been several, oh my God, interviews with our mayor, where when these things come to a head, he'll say, well, I asked them, and then they said, look, man, like, we just essentially have been bamboozled. I just wanted to add that in there.
So yeah, just quickie on the, I want to make sure it's water time, but a quickie on the, who's the power plant for facility 2?
We didn't use AI to draw that cartoon. Power plant, TVA. I could throw a baseball that far.
And that's at Mississippi border.
Special
So that's Mississippi.
optional high school, elementary school. I mean, these people, like right here, we spend a bunch of time over here because you can fly a drone up here and take pictures, but you can't go over it because it's a critical infrastructure. But people are living right here, and this picture's not really showing it, but literally, like right down this road is this other gas site. They now have the turbines, so they had 35 turbines at the first site. They kept 15 of them. All the rest of them are down here. The site's being developed. Now Elon's saying that he has acquired a power plant from a foreign country and is shipping it in, and is going to build his own power plant in Mississippi. And Mississippi, back to the turbines, has already agreed and said, oh, he can run those turbines for 364 days without a permit.
And so essentially they're creating like this blueprint for how to quickly adopt the Silicon Valley type of mentality to like go fast, build fast, go into production fast, forget about piloting, forget about doing like risk assessments, just go full speed ahead. It's also very problematic that it's like a false win, that, you know, while they've decreased the amount of turbines in Memphis or Shelby County, but you're still putting it up like in Mississippi. And as you can see in this map, I mean, this dotted.
There's no air pollution fence here.
Right.
It's going from right here.
And I'm gonna say this is important, not just, I mean, they're setting like this new pattern of operation in Memphis. We just stopped a data center from going into Hawkins County, They wanted to set up, they were gonna burn ethane that's been separated from natural gas that's been harvested in the area. The methane goes into a pipeline, the ethane needs to be sold somewhere else. They're gonna burn it in Hawkins County, use the County Powers Act there to hold that one up. But, you know, TVA is talking all the time now about co-supply.
Yes.
And they have this new proposed 365 resilience plan, which actually encourages large energy users to install their own generation capacity. And then in some cases, TVA would even buy the surplus back from them. And it's a way of TVA getting around the National Environmental Policy Act process that they would currently have to go through if they were building their own generation capacity.
So normally, TVA doesn't allow other utilities or other entities to, you know, have power plants. They want to be the monopoly. And so this is a very new situation because they are so stressed for power generation because the grid is like at its max. So you've got these data centers that are just like crazy power hungry things. So we're in this new era of TVA that's like very sketchy, and this co thing is new, is very new for this, you know, nearly 100-year-old federally owned utility. So that's something that to okay, water stuff. Okay, what do we have here?
Ooh, there we go.
So like I said, you know, our organization is all about drinking water supply. So Memphis is very unique, and really all of West Tennessee relies on what's called the Memphis Sand Aquifer. And so it is a huge formation that spans actually parts of 8 states, and it kind of stops just before the Tennessee River. So everything on the other side of the Tennessee River over here is kind of a mix of surface water, groundwater, but much more surface water heavy this side of the state. The Mississippi River, and you know all the tributaries that drain into that, that's kind of that is the coastal plain. It's muddy water, you know, it's kind of higher silty, and that's natural. It's okay, you know, you've got kind of these clear streams that everyone wants to protect really well, which is very important. But in our you know western Tennessee, these streams have kind of been dumping grounds because then the water is naturally going to be muddy. So corporations are like, well, I'm just going to keep dumping in here, and we've not had good accountability on surface water protection in West Tennessee at all. But everyone's getting their water from underground. So there's been this disconnect. Well, we've got this pure, amazing aquifer that's hundreds of feet down. Think about a big sandbox. It's not like the rocky karst stuff y'all have out here. It's like a big layer of sand that's been rained in. And it's super slow moving, and it's super pure water. So there's been this disconnect. Our good water's under here. Who cares what we do to the land? Well, it turns out it's connected. It takes about 80 years for the connection to show up, but it is. So, you know, Memphis is very much an old industrial, heavy manufacturing town. And so we have this shallow aquifer. So if you go directly below the land, anywhere between 30 and 100 feet, you're going to hit some water. That's the shallow aquifer. It's known to be pretty polluted. We've dumped a lot of chemicals. We've had accidental spills. And also back in the day, they just buried stuff. They're like, oh, well, just put it over there and we're good to go, right? Well, time's catching up with us. The next layer you see is this clay layer. So, you know, think about a dense layer of clay, you know, stuff doesn't really get through it. And then you have the good Memphis aquifer water, the big sandy layer. Well, over the past few decades, we've started to realize, we, the scientific community, started to realize this clay layer has naturally occurring gaps in it, breaches. Now this is important geology to understand because when we talk about our drinking water threats and our water quality threats, we need to understand what's going on below the surface. And before realizing that there was these gaps in the clay layer, you know, it was just like pump away, pump away. City of Memphis, or MLGW, pumps nearly 150 million gallons of water a day. And half of that water is going to commercial water users. We've got a lot of heavy manufacturing in this town. And then you also have private wells on top of that, which is a whole other thing. But think about the drawdown effect. So you've got some pollution over here, you've got a well over here. It's sucking this stuff down. It moves slowly though. So we haven't seen the evidence of it for nearly 100 years. But there's starting to be wells in South Memphis, wells in a more wealthy, affluent area of Collierville. But they're perched out over here where the clay starts to pinch out. So there's not as much protection. So Collierville and South Memphis, very different demographically, but dealing with serious water quality issues and serious potential impact on public health. All right, people, the water needs to be thought, we need to think about it. So, with all that to be said, with all that to be said, xAI, okay, so, the water side of things is like this glimmer of hope. So
Wait, you're not gonna say something nice about xAI?
I know,
are you?
it's been crazy. We'll talk a little about like the dynamics of the coalition in this too, because it's been challenging, just to be very honest. So, so we're back in this same nook where here's xAI facility number 1. There's a zoomed in version. So here's Tennessee Valley Authority. Protect Our Aquifers forming what happened in late 2016. This guy caught wind of some permits being drilled into the deep aquifer across from TVA's coal plant right here. You see humongous coal ash pond.
TVA, when they shut down their coal plant and built this gas plant, they originally promised us they were gonna use gray water from a wastewater treatment plant.
Yes, so right across the street, you got our city's Southern Wastewater Treatment Plant. Treats 70 million gallons of our city's wastewater a day, and then it's discharged into the Mississippi River. It's pretty nasty, even treated, it's still pretty nasty because they do not take enough care for the Mississippi River, and they use it as a big dumping.
Dilution is the pollution solution.
So TVA was like, well, your wastewater effluent is too nasty for us to use. I heard that this amazing aquifer is super pure and I can drill a well and then it's free water. I'm gonna do that. So he gets one of these permits from Shelby County Health Department.
A mole in
Oh,
Shelby County
man.
Health Department,
Yeah.
actually awesome environmentalist
Yeah.
who later became a pollution control guy,
Yeah.
try to do the right thing.
So we were formed to help join a lawsuit to sue TVA to be like, hey, you can't drill these wells. And long story short, we thought we were gonna be an organization that was like, stop TVA, protect the aquifer, we're good to go. Over this first few years, it took some years to get all this stuff going. There was a study that TDEC required be done to show if there's a connection. If you do run these pumps, is it gonna pull down the coal ash? And the study was like, yep, it will. It's like, well, we were right. So now the permits for those wells TVA drilled are for emergency use or monitoring only. So now TVA is buying water from MLB&W. And that Davis wellfield that I showed you at the very beginning, that's in Boxtown. So for a long time, we've still been very much, opposed to TVA staying on the aquifer, using our drinking water infrastructure. We want them to reuse recycled wastewater, but they can't use it as is. They need a new facility that's gonna further clean it up because it has to be high quality water to go through their cooling systems and not gunk stuff up. So, I'm just trying to have like how much detail. Okay, so this is one of those like community campaigns that we didn't know how it was gonna pay off, but it was worth it in the end. Well, it's still not over, but it's getting closer. So, y'all remember the rolling blackouts of Christmas 2022? That was like our TVA's first ever like actual blackouts. So that happened. This TVA plant was actually in full-blown operation. Like that one didn't get affected by the coal, like it was still going. So they are pumping out as much power as possible. AKA, they need 7 million gallons of water a day to run that facility at full steam. You go, and then we are having, water main breaks. The fire suppression in warehouses are busting. We've got boil water notice all across city of Memphis, and we are in like dire straits. People don't have access to water, don't have access to power. So TVA is going full blast. Our MLGW president has to call TVA and say the moment these blackouts are over, we need you to scale back because we gotta send water to the neighborhood. Like we can't push enough water out. So this was like Protect Our Aquifer, the community's like worst nightmare is now we're in a situation where our public utility has to choose water for power or water for people. And that was like the worst case scenario. So that kind of reinvigorated our campaign in 2023 to say TVA needs to get off the aquifer and get off our drinking water infrastructure. And instead of going for TVA, we targeted the campaign at MLGW and City of Memphis. Because what we're also asking MLGW to do is lose your biggest water customer. So we're like, hey, you're gonna miss out on some revenue, but we need this for the sanctity of people. And also, you're sucking that much water, you're pulling down pollution faster towards Boxtown's drinking water wells. So we did this whole big campaign in like summer of 23. We went before MLGW board, we went before city council, you know, like it was a big whole thing. And so we got verbal commitment from MLGW that it was like, we support this. We're not going to put up the money for it, but like in theory, we support it. It's like, okay, well, win for now. Fast forward another year, in March of 2024, our city mayor, MLGW president, Chamber of Commerce are having the infamous March meeting with the xAI team, and they're asking, you know, how much water do you need? How much power do you need? And at the time, they need 1 million gallons of water. They said, don't try and drill a well, the community will fight you. MLGW has the water, but what we're really trying to get going is this water recycling facility to treat this wastewater, not only for their facility, but would y'all be interested in helping get it to the scale that TVA needs too? So that conversation, that was a community ask for years. That conversation came up in this closed room view. And that was a big point of pride that like, I think the community was just like, there's so much going on at once. It got lost in the minutia, but I'm like, this is literally the first community win that we've had on this, but now it's about accountability and follow through. So the day after they announced this facility, the xAI in 2024, the next day MLGW says, xAI said they're gonna build this thing. And we're like, prove it! So that's what we've been doing the past 8 months. And so this is where we're at right now. So purple pipes, if you're familiar with water reuse in the industry, purple pipes mean non-potable recycled water. That's good. We like purple pipes. We don't have any of those in Memphis. I think there's a couple little like irrigation systems in like Crosstown and stuff, but like otherwise it's like pure aquifer water, cheap, good to go. And we use it once, who cares? It's like no. So this little image we kind of mocked up from the permit process and from some presentations. So the first thing that was like getting real, like we're watching the TDEC data viewer, we're seeing communication go back and forth. But we got word that xAI might want to use some land that the city owns next to the wastewater treatment plant. And our whole thing at the beginning of this was like, who's gonna own it? Who's gonna operate it? What does that part of it look like? Because we don't trust nobody, but we don't trust xAI especially. Well, the day before a city council committee meeting, it gets thrown onto the agenda the afternoon before that xAI wants to purchase 13 acres of land from the city right here to build this facility. We're like, what the hell is in this agreement? And so we all hop to get to the city council committee meeting, like first thing in the morning, and we're like, delay, deny, delay. We got to figure out what this is. Do they need to sell it? Should it be a lease? How do we make sure this is only used for a water reuse facility? Can there be a reversion clause? We're going to learn a lot about real estate real quick. A reversion clause where if you don't do what you say and you don't do it within a year, can the city buy this thing back? Can you get the city back?
Or what happens if Elon leaves town?
Exactly. When we run xAI out of town, how do we make sure this facility stays operating so that we can keep TVA off the aquifer? So these are the kind of things we wanted to see, like a right of first refusal is what it's called, where they have to ask City Memphis first if they want to buy the facility, if they do up and leave. So those are the kind of things where we're like, how do we make sure this stuff gets into this contract? And so that turned into like, about a 2-week campaign. And there was a lawyer on city council that really championed this issue. And she was like, I want to see these provisions in this thing. She learned a heck of a lot. Nobody knew what wastewater was. Nobody knew what water reuse was. Like this was like, starting from like the ground surface to get stuff done quick. So long story short, we got most of the provisions we wanted, and then of course this signed document has little tweaks and things that like is a little bit different, but for the most part, we got that right of first refusal, we got that reversion clause, all these things right happening. Okay, this is looking real. But at the time, the community is like, well, we don't want this thing, period. And it's like, but wait, y'all, like this is the thing we've been wanting, but nobody trusts xAI and Elon. It's like, okay, we're with you on that, absolutely. So it was really challenging to like get this project that can be beneficial to our drinking water supply, but the community is so against it just because it is a tie to xAI.
I got called a sellout for supporting it.
I did too.
Me too.
I wasn't even in town.
I know. And that was like community trust is like our number one thing, And so it's like, what? So that's been a big part of this too, is like, we're not doing this with like these blinders on, like it's for the aquifer, get over it, you're gonna love it. It's like, no, really, how do we make sure this is beneficial for the community, and what are those policy and contractual things that we can put into documents if they do go sideways, we have legal basis to sue. So like, these are the kind of things we're trying to look for at every step of the way. So since then, there's been an operating permit draft. So that's a TDEC thing, and this is to operate the facility. So we ran some public meetings. There's Latricia presenting on the comment writing workshop. So we requested a public hearing from TDEC. Said, hey, it's a big thing. Nobody knows what the heck this is. We need a public hearing, and we need an opportunity to comment. So TDEC granted that request. We had public meetings, like help people understand like what the heck this even is, write their comments if they so chose. And so they had this TDEC hearing. Representative Justin J. Pearson, whose district this is, he was kind of the state rep host, if you will, of the hearing. And he's been on the fence about the water reuse facility too. And it's like core coalition partner, your friend, my state rep, and he's just like, Sarah,
We're caught in the middle.
he's like, I don't know. And I'm like, no, man, I promise this is good. So it's been super challenging because it's hard to just even understand what this thing is, period, but then come back down to this trust and transparency. And so that's where, we kind of found our alignment with community concerns and asking for transparency, accountability, and ensuring that the best we can get in this deal. So, what else do I have? So, where we are right now with the water reuse facility, we've had the hearing, there's been the public comment period, there was a ceremonial groundbreaking that xAI hosted. What are your little fake pile of dirt? I'm like, oh my God, whatever. But what that is a good indication that they are now doing some very public media fluffy stuff to say we are committed to this. And not only was that, was that, but also the TVA CEO was there and made remarks and said we are committed to this because we still need them to sign an end user agreement. We need them to commit to using this water and not our drinking water. And then you see Nucor Steel was going to use 500,000 gallon demand. They bailed. And we're trying to figure out the reason, but I'm pretty sure the reason is they didn't want to build this distribution line. And it's like, you're going to have to get over that, Nucor, so we're not giving up on that yet. But it's a much smaller user demand compared to the up to 5 or 7 million gallons a day. They're at about, they also have a private well into the aquifer where they get free water. So they're like, we kind of like that. We'll figure it out. So there's some advocacy still on that piece, but so they had their ceremonial, groundbreaking or whatever, and it's like, that's cute, follow through. And then most recently, Young Gifted Green, Sierra Club, and Pedro Aquifer, we wrote a recommendation letter to the city of Memphis. Because city of Memphis, remember this is a city-owned wastewater treatment plant. So in order for xAI to access this effluent, they need an agreement that says you can have, this number of gallons of effluent a day. And so our recommendations are make sure you charge them for that effluent. All of a sudden it's a commodity people want. You gotta charge. Because also this is new workflows for y'all, there's new monitoring, there's new work that goes into this. So we said,
And we're gonna lose revenue.
and right.
Yeah,
So
it's gotta get made up somehow.
Yeah, and multi-W's losing revenue, so we need a nominal fee to purchase the effluent. We want to see this xAI water reuse facility open to the public for tours, for K-12 education, for STEM education, for juvenile justice programming. How do we open up these as career path and re-entry as career paths? We want to see workforce development between workers here. Up here, like these are higher skilled operator jobs. Like this is pretty an advanced facility. So these are going to be good jobs. That's going to be between 10 and 15 full-time jobs. It's like, how are those going to be Memphian jobs? Jobs from 38109? And how do we make sure that this is happening? So we want to see that in an agreement of like at least the intention of a workforce development program that we can flesh out and build out later. And then the fourth thing was, about like emergency management operation. You know, this thing is like, it's not pointless, but it's not reaching its full potential if during a winter storm, TVA still has to use their wells, or they have to buy from LGW. We want this thing weatherized, we want this thing having solar generator backup, not gas turbine backup, but solar and battery supply backup. We want this thing resilient. So those are the types of things we want to see in this agreement. And then we also asked Public Works for a public meeting. It's like, y'all have not said a freaking peep to the public about what this is, what's the benefits, blah, blah, blah. It's been our nonprofits educating and advocating, and we don't want to lose community trust. And it's like, this is y'all's freaking job. Come on, come on. So we just submitted that letter last week, I believe. Got a response and sending this to legal, we'll be in touch, and we requested a response by middle of next month on how they're gonna move forward. So depending on their response, we'll know if we're gonna go harder or if we'll say, okay, let's keep playing together. So we're not like celebrating yet, but what this does say is that, you know, having these data centers that are very water heavy next to wastewater treatment plants can be a renewable source of water that does not impact the community's drinking water supply. It could be a win. There's a whole lot of ifs and stuff. Facility number 2, I'm not even gonna have time to get into, but long story short, we don't know a whole lot about nothing on that one. And we think they're using a lot more air-cooled technology and not just solely water-cooled. So it probably, in theory, might not be as much of a water footprint, but we have still taken the hardline stance, no aquifer water for cooling the supercomputer.
The aquifer also doesn't recognize a state boundary. Right. They're right across the street in Mississippi is, I don't know if you can see it, is a water tower. And Mississippi has much less, Shelby County, Memphis, has the most protective groundwater drilling regulations of any place really in the southeast. But definitely in Tennessee, Mississippi, not so much.
Yeah. So that's what we kind of like put like a scenario document together on like where could they get water and what actions are we going to take. But we've made it very clear we want to see water reuse as the #1 option and nothing else. But we've got some plans in action if they try something else. But that is the shortest version of that story. So there's been a lot of community resistance. This is a student-led group called Tigers Against Pollution out of University of Memphis. They've been amazing. Woo, they've been killing it. They've had marches. There's been a lot of just like really just solid community resistance and keeping it like up in the public's purview. And yeah, you can your time down here.
Yeah, there's some other
Protect our aquifer on Instagram.
There's some other youth groups as well. High school students, I want to make sure that I name them. They're from Westwood High School, which is one of the adjacent schools that is near Colossus 1. It's Youth Minds United. Also some young people from organization Bridges also has been very active as well. And was it Links Against Pollution. Rhodes College also has some student activists that have been working collaboratively with Tigers Against Pollution as well. So we have done a significant amount of engagement and coaching and capacity building, and from us, to help our youth to also ensure that their voices are being heard in this process as well. And the very last thing that I will say, we literally, the coalition, have been the core educators about this process. And sometimes it puts us in precarious situations where when we did some of the public comment trainings around the water reuse facility, so it's balancing human emotion and trauma that's not just solely induced by xAI, but a legacy of distrust, environmental racism, and the like, while at the same time being sensitive to that and saying, do you want them to be on our drinking water source? You know, so
like status quo is what we can say.
Right.
Like if they're using the aquifer right now. Right.
Right.
So do we want to keep that, or And that's been the challenge.
And then also, there's a other like gap that is very startling, but is an opportunity for us as well. Kind of explaining to community like the hierarchy of power and decision making. There's so many moving parts. Like the water use facility, you have to work with TDEC, right? For the air permit, that was with the health department. With the land sale, that was with city council. So we know you only get half a credit in U.S. government in high school. So we also have to balance that. So it's a lot of layers of community education as well that we've had to kind of pull together very quickly.
Okay.
Questions now? Yeah, we'll answer those questions.
I got a lot of questions.
Yeah.
When you're saying the health board and stuff, is that your all's air quality control board? So are they're kind of amalgamated into your health department, one of the same regulations, so you have a board and all that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they have to meet the minimum requirements of Tennessee
Familiar.
rules and regulations, which of course are the bare minimum of the federal laws require. They could do better.
Yeah.
The big theory behind environmental law was the Fed sets the minimum, the states can do better, and if they delegate it further, they can do better. But instead, in reality, we're getting less service because we don't have that kind of access that TDEC provides here in Tennessee, better than any other state in the Southeast that I'm aware of in terms of public access to the records.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you mentioned that, and that is part of deep contention that we have with our health department is specifically for this community in 38109 is so vulnerable, and you know that already, and you don't take those nuances into consideration when issuing a permit. So I'm glad that you asked that question, because that really is something that, for lack of a euphemism, makes my personal blood boil. Is that a health entity or institution is really essentially not doing their job.
They don't do their job here either, so don't feel too bad. It's
I'm with the Clean Up TVA Coalition, which
Yay!
and most TVA members have, and working on this from the TVA end has been a really tricky conversation, because usually energy user of this size would be a direct serve customer of TVA. TVA would have a little bit more control over things. But as it came through questionable means, as you said, as an MLGW customer, all TVA could really do is say, well, we have to approve it because it's the size, we have to approve the interconnection. And Keyshawn and I were at the board meeting where they took that vote, and it was there that we learned, we all expected once the interconnection was approved, the turbines would be turned off. And it was at that meeting that Jeff Lash had to admit that's a behind the meter resource, we can't tell them what to do. So we're gonna give them 150 megawatts of our power and let them keep running their turbine.
There's 300 megawatts because of that.
And you're gonna see that increasingly again in Tennessee. It didn't really make the news, but that Blue Oval site, which is a direct serve customer of TVA, they also built their own turbines. They have a combined cycle plant of their own over there. And I think that's going to be an increasing trend everywhere, is people generating their own power, which is just going to be super difficult for public engagement, and we're going to need lots of good lawyers to help with it.
But I wanted to say that the reason that's so important right now is the new board members are being voted on currently in the Senate. They were asked the question about data centers. They're all pretty bad, just in general, but they were asked about data centers. They all did commit to a data center rate case, which is important, but only one of them would commit to saying that these centers need to do better about bringing their own power. And Senator Schiff called them out on that and said, you have the decision-making ability to require that of them.
Right.
So they're probably gonna get voted in, they're gonna be bad, but we are gonna have to hold them.
The important thing to watch
standard.
out for there, Leah, is that special data center rate going to be higher or lower? Like our water situation in Memphis, the more water you use, the cheaper it is.
Yeah, are they gonna wholesale the power, or are they gonna actually the cost of building all this regeneration? And that's gonna be the details. One note on one of the board members that potentially would be confirmed is current MLGW Commissioner Mitch Graves who was actually the sitting chairman of MLGW when they voted down TVA's never-ending contract. And we lobbied the hell out of that board to make sure that didn't happen. And, you know, obviously he's a Trump appointee, so like, I don't think he's gonna be like our champion for clean energy or anything, but it is potentially a good direct line of communication and some relationship building that we've done over the years that I will most definitely be trying to utilize. And with that,
Quick and easy, how much power do each of those turbines generate of the 33?
They're all different sizes, and so that's been another difficult thing, because we can't, since there's no permits,
sure.
we don't know which models they are, and so we've had to guess just based on what they look like when you go. I mean, the company that they come from is called Solar Turbine.
Yeah.
And
Like,
I don't
give
know
me
where
a break.
that,
Can you
I don't know where that comes
greenwash?
from.
That is greenwashing 101.
So
The
we got a lot-
solar turbines that run on methane gas, give me a break.
We have this really awesome attorney, Patrick Anderson, of Southern Environmental Law Center, that's learned how to basically visually identify these things and make those calculations. And so that is super tricky.
I think that there was a recent Wall Street Journal article that I think tried to put something out. It was like 450 megawatts of power when all of them were cranked up full capacity. So that was like what they needed when there was no grid connection. And so with the 15, I don't know how many that would be, like probably 100.
So they've been being like a 600 megawatt facility so far.
Mhm.
The second site, they're looking at more than a gig. It was like a gig and a half
Yeah.
of power.
Which is like the whole TVA plant in Memphis that like is a huge gas plant. That's about a gig.
And-
Gigawatt, 1
and-
gigawatt.
and we know that
And
because-
that plus some.
And we know that because we did Freedom of Information Act requests and found a submittal that xAI had made to the EPA saying, hey, would it be cool if we ran, 1.56 gigawatts of turbines down here in South Haven, just on the Mississippi side of the line?
This was touched on, I didn't hear the details, I don't know if I'm getting this all right, but there was something about how the tax revenue allocation changed after some additional pushback, so can you say more about that and what you were told?
Sure, so there was an environmental ordinance that was passed through city council where essentially xAI pays property taxes for the building that they're in. And so based on that money that's paid in property taxes, there's 25% of that pot of property tax money that will go to 38109 and 38116. Now, we didn't agree that it should be 25%. We thought it should be flipped on its head at minimum 75%, because where's the other 75% going? We don't know. We don't know what the city of Memphis is gonna do with the other 75%. But it was nuts and chaotic.
And it was capped too, right?
Yeah, and it was capped. It was
Yeah.
capped.
Talk about the community advisory
Yeah,
to it.
so we also were very adamant, I was gonna fight to the bloody death on this, that it had to be community, like, oversight and accountability to dictate, like, how that money moves. And I know a sticky point for us is, we don't trust the city. We don't trust the city to allocate funding appropriately. I've seen this with my own eyes. I also used to work in local government, where it's easy to just push them, especially this money, because it's generated through property tax revenue. It's not connected to like state funding, federal funding. It's more
Goes into the full general fund.
right, right.
Yeah.
And so with the community advisory, the way that it's written, essentially representation from 38109 and 38116 will be a part of this council that will essentially provide advisement on how this money should move. Now, there isn't clarity on the selection process, so there's still some advocacy work needed to get more context around how are you going to select people. Because are you going to, for lack of you're going to choose a sellout? I mean, like, who's going to be the people that are going to be represented? And the last thing that I will say is, we're also trying to figure out sales tax revenue. You saw all of those turbines. Those turbines are expensive, and with this upcoming water reuse facility, there's still potentially money on the table. And so we're trying to figure out the nuances around that, and then also we know that we have an interest in state legislature. So we're trying to be careful where we don't tip something off where there'll be a block. So like, for example, in the state of Louisiana, like, you can't even do community benefits agreements, so we don't want to see that happen in the state of Tennessee. But we do want to explore, like, can we get a percentage of the sales tax that will be specifically earmarked for Shelby County, and then taking it a step further, that is specifically is earmarked for 38116 and 38109, and not Collierville or Germantown or more affluent parts of the county, but that it goes directly to the impacted communities.
And there already is in Tennessee, like, huge tax breaks in law for data centers in particular. And to the point of the sales taxes, the chips themselves are the most expensive part of this whole thing. Our trustee in Shelby County advised Elon Musk that if he had the chips delivered to another location and then truck them from the other location to the actual xAI facility, that he could automatically knock off like 40% of the retail
So it's
taxes.
like our own leadership is like, let me help you, corporation. Let me help you shift the community. And one thing to note about this community benefits thing is, like, Memphis is not a very community benefits friendly environment. Let's just say that. We give out a lot of pilot tax breaks to, like, literally every corporation. So this is very unique for xAI not to have one. So that really was a unique thing. So there is a lot of potential funding that could be used for public benefit. And so in that initial statement that we put out in, June of 2024, we said we need a community benefits agreement. And then everything else happened. It was chaos for the past, 8 months. But this little ordinance situation was kind of a glimmer of hope. But the way it went down was so not true to the intention of a community benefits agreement, in that it was very
There was no
Memphis,
community.
very Memphis
The
mayor.
community didn't come together to draft it. The mayor's
And
office.
the community didn't even show up to support it. They didn't even bother coming to the meetings, and like, I was one of the only people that even said anything on the record that was like sort of supportive, but more like, here's the things we want to see in it. If you don't have it, don't vote for it. But they did anyway. But then it was just very weird. And then when we were asking for the community advisory council to be in the actual ordinance, Memphis mayor says, well, you elected officials can speak for the community. It's like, no, city council is not gonna dictate how this 25%, it's gonna be between $2 and $3 million a year, is gonna be used in 38109. We need residents of 38109 dictating how this money is gonna be used. So just the whole way this community benefits thing went down was so not the intention of a community benefits agreement, and it has been absolute, like, continuing distrust builder in the community with city leadership. And I just hate for folks to think that this is how it should be done, like this is the precedent we want to set. In theory, 25% is a nice little thing, but like, how is this going to play out in reality, and how are we ensuring the community is going to get what they deserve out of this? Or not deserve, I mean, they deserve a hell of a lot more than 50%, but that's like some of the messiness of how this went down. So it was a separate resolution that was passed to say you need a community advisory council. So that's still, I just think is disgusting.
And I just wanted to look at, there wasn't a whole lot of media coverage of it.
Yeah.
This past winter, the same guy who just is responsible for rolling back our wetlands protections in this state, and I will say his name, Kevin Vaughn,
Like, yeah.
pushed hard and actually passed legislation that makes it against the law for a private corporation to enter into a community benefits agreement with a community if they receive any money from the Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development. So if they get any,
Which is like the opposite.
Subsidy.
You're getting public money, and therefore you don't have to have a community
you can't,
agreement.
you can't.
It's like, shouldn't it be like, if you're getting public money, you have to have, like,
I know we're over time.
I'm trying to find everybody.
We didn't mention this, but also something that we have been advocating for was around solar. So when Sarah mentioned earlier with the land that was purchased like adjacent to Colossus 1, fingers crossed, it looks promising that there will be, of course it won't be a lot. It likely will be small. We were trying to advocate for 100 megawatts wish list. It's probably going to be like less than 50. However, nevertheless, what we hope will come out of this is that, one, it could be scaled so that it will be less reliance on the grid. Of course, absolutely no connections to these turbines. So that is like, I'm gonna use scare quotes. I'm scared to say a win. I don't want to be attacked by the but it does like have like some benefits. Another thing that we have been advocating for is if there are like rolling blackouts, like there is some type of way for the immediate community to benefit from this potential solar. So I did want to mention that, because if this does come to pass, just like the water reuse facility, it has implications for data centers globally, right? Also, I know, I don't know if I can name this. We're working with a very reputable research firm that is essentially doing the research and data collection around viability with solar panels, with data centers. So look out in November for that. There'll be a webinar and like all this other stuff around it, but did want to name that as well.
And the whole history of this xAI fight is in this issue of the Sierra Club's newsletter.
Yay.
All right, and the last thing I was gonna say is, like, you know, we talked a lot about like the specific issues we've all been working on, and like our organizations have been trying to address like the immediate harm that this facility specifically had addressed and caused. But there's a lot of folks in the camp of like, we don't want to say this here at all, we don't want xAI at all. And that's been challenging, but also how do we create space for both of those, where we have to get into the minutia of the regulations and all of this stuff to like try and get some of these like offsets and like this you know, solutions, but also there's folks that just are fighting them just in general, and like that is a great place to be also. And I just want to put that out there that like we need that level of community resistance just on the whole data center explosion period, and then community groups like ours that are really enabled to like get into the data are going to be critical to ensure that like we can reduce their power demand, reduce their water demand, but also keep that resistance up in general, so we're not just like overtaken by techno-fascism. That's pretty much
Techno-fascism.
Thank you.